Welcome to the Exponential Edge podcast with your host, Arya Salur. I'm excited to have you join me on this journey, exploring the forefront of technological advancements and innovation that will shape our future. As a junior at Acton-Boxborough Regional High School in Massachusetts and the CEO of SecArmor, a cybersecurity startup, I'm fascinated by the transformative power of technology. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into 5 key areas that are poised for exponential growth in the next decade. We'll be exploring the realms of cybersecurity, generative AI, sustainability and climate tech, biotech and human longevity, as well as the reshoring of manufacturing. And we'll also go over rising startups disrupting the marketplace. These topics and businesses hold immense potential to revolutionize our world and redefine the way we live, work, and interact. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are at the forefront of these fields. In just 30 minutes, our goal is to provide you with 5 signature nuggets of wisdom from our guests. These key takeaways will empower you with knowledge and help you stay ahead in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week. Hi everyone, today's guest is Jay Srinivasan, CEO of Truvian Health. Hi Jay.
Hi there, Arya. Good to finally meet.
Definitely. Glad we could do this. So, just to start off, you went to NIT Karnataka for electrical engineering, and then transitioned to biomedical engineering in Drexel, eventually doing an MBA in Northwestern. So, you've had a great education. So, could you talk about your transition from the electrical engineering side to biomedical engineering?
Absolutely. So, just a little bit about myself. So, I grew up in India, as you pointed out, and I grew up pretty much, traveling all of India. My father was a Korean military officer, so we lived all over the country. And right from when I was a kid, from the age of maybe 5 or 6, I always wanted to be a doctor. And so, my desire to be a doctor was sort of a little bit of infatuation with, doctors in the family, and the fact that I really thought of it, and I still believe it's one of the most noble professions outside of teaching, to really engage in. So I always aspired to do it. And, as luck would have it, I only wanted to go to one school in India, and it's one of the hardest schools to get into in the world. And it's the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And that was probably the only med school I couldn't get into. And so I decided to, just as a natural sort of inflection, end up in engineering. And when I went to NIT Surathkal or Karnataka, it was really for me to build the core skills that I felt was needed if I was to transition into eventually doing something in healthcare. And electrical engineering was great because it's obviously a foundational engineering discipline, and then it allowed me to learn, besides the electrical engineering pieces, learn like computing and other things, which then was a natural transition into biomedical engineering. The goal eventually has always been, through my career, it's like, along the way, just build the tools necessary to eventually help address healthcare, because I passionately believe in it, and which is why I've been in it, as a career.
Can I ask, why didn't you go into the practice of medicine rather than the engineering side?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I came to grad school. When I came to do my biomedical engineering program at Drexel, biomedical engineering was still nascent. It was nascent in the United States. It was literally non-existent as an engineering discipline in India at that time. And I had the opportunity that when I was done with engineering, I could have gone ahead and gone to med school in the United States. And as the beauty about fate is that you're destined to do something, and things sort of happen. And what happened is, when I was going through what eventually was going to be a PhD in biomedical engineering, my parents emigrated to the States, and I wanted to be around to support them through the process. So I was done with engineering and then moved on to industry. But on retrospect, I could retire at some point and really go back to med school. I'd still probably want to do that, as
Yeah.
sort of off my bucket list.
But biomedical engineering has really taken off in the past few decades, and it's really the future. So you made a good choice in that aspect.
Yeah.
So talking about Truvian now, your company is making waves in the healthcare industry with the benchtop diagnostic instrument, which is your trademark technology. So, could you just provide a quick overview of what your company does and how their technology helps with diagnostic tests for blood? I know you test for a lot more components than probably the three biggest ones, which are the metabolics, the lipids, and the blood count for blood cells. So, could you go over some of the additional testing methods as well?
Sure. So Truvian, Truvian's a company that's actually headquartered in San Diego, California. So we're small today. We're about 100 people strong, and the company was built around the thesis that routine blood testing or just routine health testing, if we could make it convenient, affordable, and actionable, to healthcare consumers, and we don't view patients, we view the entire body of consumers. That's you and I and everyone around that we hold dear. As partakers of healthcare, we really believe we wanted to provide a solution that could deliver on that vision of
Mhm.
ours. And so, if you think about routine blood testing, so today's workflow is you basically, get a blood test order from your doctor. You yourself, either get it, or in your case, your parents may talk to your doctor and get you a blood test order. That blood test order then requires you to go to a draw site to get your blood drawn. And it can be in the physician's office, but it can be outside in a Quest or a LabCorp or some other central lab testing site. And then, those tubes get sent to a central lab for testing, and then they come back to you days later. And at that point, you got to get another appointment with the doctor to be able to get your to get your results and understand what it means.
Mhm.
So Truvian decided, routine blood testing is about 80% of the volume that goes into the central lab. So we said, how about just bringing the central lab near you? And to do that, we would have to do the following. We would actually have to have, the key modalities or the key sort of testing techniques built into our instrument. So the technologies built into our instrument. So the three technologies that are just, prevalent in sort of routine blood testing is basically chemistry technology, so chemistry detection, it's immunoassay detection, and then it is basically hematology, which allows you to do that blood count. So what we
Yep.
did was we brought all these technologies together into a single system that's no bigger than a desktop computer. And that now allows us and creates that platform to build any sort of testing. So today we do preventative care. So that's we do the lipid panel, like you said, we do the metabolic panel, we do the blood count, we do like thyroid disease testing, as well as we do blood sugar, glucose testing. But down the road, we could do infectious disease. We could do many, many different types of things because they're all sort of the genesis of all that testing comes out of these three components that are built in. And the
Mhm.
missing component that we would eventually integrate into our platform is molecular. And once you get molecular in,
Yep.
you literally have everything in a single box.
Mhm.
And that's where we're headed.
That's great. You're shifting from, I believe, the medicine 2.0 to now the 3.0, which is try to catch a wide variety of these diseases that are um, in the early steps before they can progress, right? So,
Absolutely.
mhm. And you mentioned kind of a parallel between these desktop computers and your new benchtop systems. And I think that's a great analogy between, I mean, the 90s and 2000s when these big computer mainframes were turning into these laptops and desktops. The shift was happening, that shift of efficiency, which you guys are now doing, shifting from a centralized location to these pharmacies that make it accessible for anyone to go to. So, could you talk about the shift specifically and the distribution of how you guys are specifically making this shift?
Yeah. So the analogy, you got it. The analogy really is like today, right? All tubes travel, right? Your blood tubes travel to some central location for testing, and we've always believed, and this goes back to the whole sort of paradigm of desktop computing versus mainframe computing. So in the 70s and early 80s, mainframe computing pretty much sort of ruled the roost, including into the 90s, and really, desktop computing it started with, obviously Microsoft, for example. If you just think about their vision, it was put a desktop on every, in every location you could find, on everyone's desk, put a computer
Mhm.
on everyone's desk, and that's why it
Yeah.
ended up being called a desktop. And then, Microsoft itself has evolved its vision, right, to saying you put that in there, but then you empower everybody, everyone in the world to be a better person, a better, to take advantage of the technologies that are put in there.
Mhm.
Our thesis is similar. We really believe the first thing that we need to do when we think about decentralizing is just stop moving tubes. Why not just move people? And the way we move people is make it convenient so it's in their flow. Wherever you're headed, we're gonna have one of the Truvian solution, available for you. So an instrument's going to be available. A bank of instruments is going to be available for you to be able to be tested. So that's number one. The second thing is, if you can get tested, and you can get tested that within the context of a single doctor's visit, you can have your blood drawn, you can get your results. And basically, what we built provides you this real unique sort of value prop, right? So from the moment of draw to the moment of getting results, we shortened the time. The distance from a moment of draw to when you get your results is also in meters, and it's no longer in kilometers or miles or whatever else you use as a metric to get to distance. So we've shortened these two things, and by shortening these two aspects, you really have made it possible that you can actually get your blood drawn, you can get your results, and you can actually have a discussion with your physician to really result in solving for preventative care. Solve for care early and often versus actually later, and at a more expensive thing. While Truvian seems like it's building an instrument, our goal really eventually is to really dislocate how care is given,
Mhm.
right? So today we believe the focus really is on like reactive care, it's on chronic care, and that's where the
Yeah.
United States sort of, in the 80-20 rule, 20% of the people, cost 80% of the healthcare spend. And we want to sort of flip it on its head to basically say, why not do preventative care and make it proactive, because then you really are going to get the value that you're really not spending as much. And if even if you spend incrementally on preventative care versus what's spent today, the value that you're going to get is you're not going to have those chronic cases happen down the road, which is really, where most people find themselves. About 50% of the United States
Yeah.
is walking around like a ticking bomb, right? And so you really
Mhm.
want to solve for that.
Yeah, I read that, and I also read that about 40% of them haven't actually gotten or never will get blood testing, which is really what you guys are trying to solve.
Absolutely.
So, um, how specifically and what biomarkers do you test for in for these chronic diseases? I'm pretty sure the four big categories are cardiovascular, um, neurodegenerative, metabolic, and then obviously cancer. So, what are these biomarkers that Truvian tests for
Yeah.
specifically for
So
this early
so
detection?
we Correct. So if you just think about it, Arya, like, I mean, we do have a menu. The menu really includes things like, we test for basically, your total bilirubin. We test for like your cholesterol, your total cholesterol. We test for like HDL. We test for LDL. We test for basically, when you think about, and those are
HDL
really
and
around.
LDL.
Exactly. So
I don't know what those are, and
okay, so yeah,
I'm
so
pretty sure a
the
lot of our
easiest way to
viewers don't know.
explain this is the way is we're testing for cholesterol. We're testing for basically, think of it as everything cardiovascular related. We're
Mhm.
testing for everything that is metabolic related, so including liver and kidney disease. And then we're testing for basically markers to really understand infection, anemia, things like that. But then over time, the same things that when you look at blood and you can do sort of like the separation of what types of blood components you have, you have red blood cells, you have white blood cells, you got platelets. So what if the count of each of
Yeah.
these three different types of cell types, and then what if within the white blood cells, you can understand the different components and different types of white blood cells you have. All of this really helps you with first understanding your basic health, but over time, using data, we can actually get to some oncology, some cancer related
Mhm.
testing. And then that allows the inflection point that device that we built in today, which only just says, I'm going to give you a count and I'm going to tell you the different types of white blood cells you have to. I can do much more with the data to tell you in a particular scenario, could you have a specific cancer related condition, and if you do, how does the physician intervene? So that's what we do today. So it's, again, it's metabolic disease, it's sort of like cardiovascular disease, it's glucose disease, it's thyroid disease, and it's basically studying blood markers specifically tied to good health, anemia stuff, and understanding like whether you have anemic and so on. But over time, it's really intended to address cancer and other sort of markers down the road. The technology itself as a platform allows us to do way more because we can keep adding menu. So we can, it's basically, think of it
Mhm.
like, Netflix or
Yeah.
Prime Video. The
You can keep
platform.
updating the
Yeah,
software.
exactly. The platform's foundational, but what we have are consumables, basically reagent kits or chemistry kits that go on the system. Those chemistry kits can be updated with new chemistries that we can put onto it, and those chemistries are used to detect the different disease types. The software itself will get updated to read those chemistries now on these kits and be able to do something with it.
Hmm. Yep, that's great. And obviously, you guys are enlarging the human longevity that the world is trending towards now, right? A lot of the podcasts I've done have focused on this topic of human longevity, and this is definitely one of the most comprehensive podcasts that I'm doing on this subject. So thanks for that. And just shifting topics a little bit, obviously the diagnostic industry has faced a high profile scandal in the Theranos scandal. Um, but I wanted you to share your insights on how such a scandal like that could maybe shift the trust of consumers or businesses, and how that may have affected you and what you're doing to address these past concerns.
Yeah, no, look, that's a great question. The diagnostic industry has had that high profile scandal, but it's sort of like endemic to every single industry, right? But what's unique about how Truvian, yeah, has been addressing it and will continue to address it is primarily driven. It's very simple, right? We're in the business of healthcare, and we're in the business of sort of preserving life, right? So since we're in that business, the most important thing is to A, be transparent, B, let data speak for itself, and C is to really establish the right foundations of process and partnerships necessary to ensure that we are constantly having the necessary controls in place to operate as a business. So let me speak to that. So in terms of transparency, we have, if you come visit us, pretty much, our entire lab is behind a glass. It's sort of like, it's in a sort of a very transparent. You're almost like in a fish tank when you're in our lab, so you can see our lab from the outside if you walk past our offices. We've been very good with sharing our data, so we obviously demonstrated that we were the first sort of like three modality system platform that's out there that can do it simultaneously, produce on the same instrument, produce results for all these three different testing technologies, and give those results within sort of under 30 minutes for what is a very large panel and takes days today. And then we also have been very good about publishing that data so that everyone can see it, right? So that it's out there, and and the questions can be asked. In terms of partnerships and sort of processes, right, we obviously follow some very robust sort of quality processes that are both ISO based, as well as ISO meaning the International Standards Organization, but also FDA, which is the Federal Drug Administration as well. So we do have processes put in place so that we can engage with both sets of parties. And when we talk about the FDA, we've engaged them in sort of a process that allows us to ask them questions, share more about our platform, get feedback from them, and actually make the necessary changes that support a clinical trial down the road. And so we've been doing that sort of work and building trust, because at the end of the day, healthcare is all about trust, right? I mean, when you go visit your physician, it's a trust based relationship, and you want to maintain that, in any transaction, any business transaction, or personal transaction you have, and we've sort of taken very deliberate steps to do it right.
That's great that you're taking these steps. And obviously, what you said earlier, you're probably the perfect person to do this. and regain that trust because of your passion towards healthcare as a whole, right? So now, considering your vision of these benchtop instruments, I believe I'm pretty sure I saw an interview which you described your vision as having one of these instruments in every nookard, right, or every street corner. Um, so obviously, you want a very widespread globalization of this technology. How does Truvian plan to handle these upgrades and updates, specifically like the consumables? How do they plan to redistribute this
Absolutely.
throughout?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So over the years, I've had the ability, sort of like the opportunity, and I would say the honor to kind of work in large companies that have done this well, and I've architected some of the systems that allow these large companies to manage, inventory, of these sort of like these reagent kits, to manage the fleet remotely. And this is when IoT was still sort of in early stages and wasn't really sort of talked about. There weren't the Internet of Things didn't exist. What existed was the Internet and things.
Mm-hmm.
And in those scenarios, we years ago at one of my companies, that I worked at, we actually connected all the devices, and we did that at that time just in R&D to be able to look at these devices and remotely be able to monitor them for health while we were still in development. Over time, we realized that what we had just built, needed to obviously be refined and so on, but could now be scaled to support when these instruments end up in the field. We've
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when sort of technology got there in terms of computing technology. The cloud got there. We were doing data centers before the cloud existed. Sort of came into being, and then we now have the ability, in the companies I worked at, but also at Truvian, where now we can actually get data from every one of our devices today, all of which sit, in settings that we have. We're not commercial yet, but from every setting we have, we get data sent to a cloud endpoint, and we can actually monitor it remotely. So we'd be able to, in the future, do things because the system itself is natively built to get updates by wire, to have two-way sort of transactions happen, for us to be able to monitor inventory, and over time be able to push inventory to our customers without having them have to order off some ordering system, assuming they set it up in such a manner that these. So think of it like auto replenishment that Amazon gives you. We'd be able to do similar capabilities on our product. And then because our scale is going to be incredible, right? I mean, our goal is to really scale,
Yeah.
to make it possible. That scale is going to automatically imply that we're going to need to be able to have just a lot of tech happen, by basically considering each one of these instruments as a single sort of endpoint for what would be a very large, think of it, dashboard or command center that we would manage, from an operational perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece that I think is important is that maintenance, and sort of this product's going to exist in retail. It's going to exist in corporate clinics. So you think like One Medical and things like that. It could exist in physician offices and so on. So we can't like operate like a large service staff that's walking around trying to, or running around trying to figure it out. So dial home capabilities built into the device will automatically provide system health on the device. And then that allows us to build predictive, sort of proactive algorithms that can then go in and determine, well, does the device need, to be replaced, or does the device need to be serviced upon? And then we will automatically perform that operation by sending someone over to that location, versus having them sort of travel waiting for that event to happen, and then proactively swap out or service depending on the location in concern.
Yep, and you mentioning that actually it reminds me of a podcast I did with the CFO of a publicly traded beauty company called Beauty Health. They have a kind of similar technology called hydrofacials, which to your benchtop technology, which it analyzes the specific customers and gives them advice for skincare and their own facial beauty and body patterns, right? So their mission was to kind of do the same thing, decentralize, like I forget the skincare specialist, right? You don't have to go to a skincare specialist. You can go to a spa or you can go to a beauty parlor anywhere near you, right? And you can get this technology, right? And they actually use this similar ideology, right? This software update to get globalization for their technology. I believe they're in 90 countries now, so
Wow.
it's definitely possible, right? And it's
Yep.
great to see that this just distribution and this way of thinking is used in other fields, right? This is really where the world is headed. These updates, not
Absolutely.
physically going to these places because that's not very viable. Mhm.
Agreed.
So, talking about the future and talking about where things are headed for healthcare, can you share the long-term vision of Truvian over the next decade or few?
Yeah. So, look, I think at Truvian, the first and most important thing for us is to build, obviously, you know, the product right and then the right product. And, we're at the stage where I think we're there with both, aspects sort of accomplished. But our platform, the platform that we actually have, that we would obviously want to go through the FDA, get it launched and commercialized. It's the first in what we believe is a solution, is sort of a suite of solutions, a family of solutions that we would build, for us to really be the healthcare partner for each and every one of us. I believe like over time, our technology isn't going to be just about providing test results and so on. Data is sort of an important component, and I have been sort of working in the field of data for many years, right? Besides the biomedical engineering design aspects, data has been sort of like an area I've been focused on for almost, I would say about 15 to 20 years. So I truly believe the next value that'll come will be the value beyond the test. So
Yeah.
how do you build sort of the next generation of technologies that really drive, think of it be through digital twins that become consults for each one who uses our platform. If to operate a platform, because a platform is actually very simple to operate. We believe, when we get this thing called CLIA waiver, you could put it in certain locations and not need a med tech to run it. You put it in all locations, in fact, and not need a med tech or a medical technician to run it, or someone who's actually trained in pathology. We would actually have anyone run it. Like you could run it, if you got trained in a sort of a quick start guide, or anybody else can actually operate the instrument. The instrument's basically like a kiosk, if you want to think of it. But beyond that of operating the instrument, when that data becomes available, our goal is, the data at the end of the day needs to be always, it's owned foundationally by the patient. It's owned foundationally by the health system or whoever transacts with the patient on ensuring that that data is secured. Our interest in that data is only primarily to determine how do you look at our data as a pooled set of data to make decisions about population health, to look at cohorts of people who can satisfy a particular clinical trial and things like that. So we will be looking at data more comprehensively versus individual patients, because we'll let the electronic medical record and physicians address individual patients. But we would like to understand broadly, how can this data
Yeah.
change behaviors that result in
Mhm.
better preventative care
Yep. So we can fix these problems as a
before they
whole,
happen. Yeah.
maybe. Right.
Yeah.
hmm So
And
that's
then,
good.
sorry, and then the last piece is like, I mean, artificial intelligence and everything around it, is something that's going to take precedence, right? And I remember a time when I used to do computing back at, I ran the computer center at NIT after school hours through running the computer club. And I always sort of dabbled with sort of artificial intelligence when artificial intelligence wasn't cool or cool enough, right? And we're fast forward now, everybody wants to talk about it. But I think
Yep.
the elements and the properties of what artificial intelligence is all about, which is if you've got good data, you can produce good outcomes. We believe that when you standardize our platform, because everything's coming off a single platform versus multiple platforms, you already are going to deal with good data
Mhm.
versus, my commentary always has been big data exists because good data doesn't. But in fact, I
Yeah.
truly believe that when good data is available, data, like any other signal, attenuates or gets bad over time and distance. So if we could actually process more and make better decisions closer to where the data gets generated, which is what our platform is all about, you're going to make very good decisions down the road in terms of preventing people from getting disease and obviously stopping it before that it
Yep. And
starts.
definitely the whole world is shifting towards AI. So it's great that you guys are using this new trendy technology for your own benchmark, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
as we conclude the podcast, I always ask this to all my guests, but would you be able to provide us five key takeaways from our conversation today?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So I think the way I look at this is if you think about what we just discussed, right? The first and most important thing takeaway is health matters. I think there's this axiom, right? Your health is your wealth, right? And I think most people just disregard it. When you're young, you disregard it a lot more. As you get older, you sort of are dealing with it. And the real important thing is health matters, right? The second thing that matters is access, right? I think despite many things, the most foundational birthright for every citizen of the world ought to be access to healthcare, and that's unfortunately the privilege of a certain few. So I believe that I would like to see a platform that is the construct under which I said it should exist at the end of every street, as I want to make sure that's available. It's obviously access and affordability, but it needs to be available to actually be even affordable, right?
Yep.
So that can be given. Disruptions needed in sort of like in healthcare. The healthcare has been, if you think about it, is still relatively antiquated as an industry. It's got too many stakeholders, and sometimes the stakeholders aren't completely aligned. But it can all happen because everyone at the end of the day has the right intent in mind. So I think disruption is necessary, which can be a combination of people, technology, process, and obviously governments. And I think like partnerships matter, right? So you can't solve this thing by being the smartest company in town or the smartest kid in town. You have to build alliances and things that can help, all of which can help sort of solve what I think is a very different lock to open. But once
Mhm.
opened, it's going to create some unbounded sort of wealth, if you want to think of it, for everybody. And that wealth comes in terms of health, right? And finally, I think the reason we've looked at how we want to build our system is we've always looked at it as you know you think about the internet, actually everyone thinks the internet's just about like connecting stuff together and so on. But the internet unlocked a foundational thing. It made everybody, gave everyone access to knowledge, and allowed somebody sitting in a very remote part of the world the same sort of access that was available for a privileged few in the modern sort of like in larger,
Yep.
more richer economies. And I think we want to do the same with healthcare, because if you can open up healthcare and make it accessible to more, educated consumers become good consumers of care. And when they become good consumers of care, you have better performing healthcare economies, because most countries are getting almost bankrupt. Most people are getting bankrupt because of the fact that healthcare costs so much. And we believe
Yeah.
that we can transform that by being a small cog in that. I don't want us to assume we're going to solve it all ourselves, but that small cog is going to be something that's going to materially change the distribution of health around the world.
Hmm. Yep. Great takeaways, great insights. Thank you for those. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Exponential Edge podcast. Thanks to our viewers for tuning into this episode. And join us next time to talk about trends, businesses, and people that will see exponential adoption in the future. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Arya. Nice chatting.
Nice. Bye.